Hello, you're very welcome to today's talk. We're looking at a piece by British artist Julian Opie called Suzanne Walking in a Leather Skirt. Normally these talks, which are part of the Hugh Lane Education Programme, take place on Wednesday mornings at 11 in the gallery with a group gathered, and there's a chat and conversation afterwards. Today, because the gallery is temporarily closed, it's coming to you via this video link. So I'll be chatting for about half an hour and we're looking at a number of images. I hope you'll enjoy the talk. Thank you. I'm going to switch out of the video link so that you can look at the images and you don't have to look at me. You don't have to look at myself either. Hide video panel. So as I said, the piece we're looking at is this. It's Suzanne walking in a leather skirt, and it was made in 2006. It's a continuous computer animation lit by LED lights, and it is situated outside Dublin City Gallery, the Hugh Lane in Parnell Square. It's a large piece, almost 2 meters tall, or almost about a meter wide, just less than, with an animation played on a double-sided LED screen. The screen sits on a raised rectangular concrete base, as you see here, and it's on permanent display in the forecourt of Parliament House on Parnell Square, the location of the gallery. The film features this elegant creature, Suzanne, an outline of Suzanne at least, a young woman walking continuously. Now, I haven't got a film, but these are the two movements, and I'll show you a film a little later, which is Suzanne in a different situation. And the animation is made by using these small LED lights as the drawn line, if you like, and part of the film, the animated film. So she's walking in front of the sweeping granite facade, as you see in the background there, a magnificent 18th century neoclassical grand house. Now, to my eye, at least, it's a very arresting piece. This is her from another angle. And a little bit closer, you can see, I think, the lights, the little dotted lights, a bright orange figure moving along the pathway, each time a different angle, but the same position. This is looking out onto the street and towards the Garden of Remembrance. I'm going to go back to the clear image here. It's a very arresting piece, certainly in its setting even more so. This bright orange, sort of amber color, if you like. It's a moving figure, very noticeably in contrast with its surroundings. It's so modern. It's definitely kind of amusing, definitely playful, funny. It's interesting. You wonder at first glance, is she real? And without doubt, she's also beautiful. I mean, a little sexually charged for sure, the way she moves, kind of languorous movements. And the other thing is immediately what strikes you, certainly does me, is what is it that you're looking at when the very first time you see this? You're looking at a portrait, a sculpture, a film, all three perhaps. Now this figure was originally part of a group. And this was a temporary exhibition, unlike this piece, which is in permanent situ. This was a temporary exhibition that was held in 2008. So there were 5 moving figures in total that paraded on O'Connell Street. Here are some examples of the pieces. This is Suzanne walking, as I mentioned. So this is the same creature walking, and this is taken from Julian Opie's website. So you see how she moves, and in the same way she moves on the screens outside the gallery. Now back to the exhibition that she was part of. This is called Walking on O'Connell Street, and this is one of the 5 figures that I mentioned. This is Jack outside the GPO. And as I said, in 2008, between January and October 2008. The exhibition was curated by the director, Barbara Dawson, the director of the gallery, and funded by Dublin City Council. And these animated sculptures or portraits, again, were LED lit. And I think you can see it. It's probably dusk here when it really comes alive, and the lighting. And they were situated on the central path of O'Connell Street. And right up to this is Julian. So that this is a self-portrait of sorts, if you like, of the artist himself walking on O'Connell Street, again on those raised concrete plinths on the other side of the street. And you can see those horizontal colours in the background that represents the passing traffic. Here is Jack again, a slightly different position, again, those horizontal colours of traffic moving past when the image was taken. And here we have Sarah, who at the time in 2008 was positioned outside the gallery. And she isn't stepping forward as the others are, but she's moving side to side, dancing outside the gallery, if you like. So these figures are very much an example of Opie's trademark graphic figures. They're superficially streamlined and simple, but despite the simplicity, particularly the animated sculptures are surprisingly individual. Each is based on a particular person, and as is typical of the artist's work, each is also an every person, just like the city dwellers who fill the surrounding area every day. This was the first large exhibition, public exhibition of work by Julian Opie in Dublin, this again, 2008, which was a hugely important and significant year for the Hugh Lane Gallery. It was a celebration of the opening in 1908 in Clonmel House in Harcourt Street. So the Municipal Gallery was celebrating its centenary, having been opened by Hugh Lane and his supporters in 1908. And so this installation on O'Connell Street remained in place for the whole of the gallery's centenary celebrations. And it was particularly appropriate for a gallery with a renowned collection of figurative artworks. And moving signs and images are obviously very familiar to us all in cities. And perhaps by using LED screens, Opie is looking to echo the idea of urban signage, moving billboards, and in this case particularly maybe traffic lights with that sort of orangey, dull orange colour. And nobody will be surprised to learn that these works are also inspired by pop art with its simplified forms and strong graphic quality, and also that harnessing of commercial design, so typical of pop art. And these things all come together to create what is a contemporary fine art piece. Julian Opie's installation in 2008 was also hugely democratic, not only in its reflection of us, city walkers, passers-by, but by locating these works on O'Connell Street, the exhibition allowed everyone access. It allowed everyone enjoy their immediacy and sophistication and humour. And in that way also it challenged the traditional gallery relationship between art and its consumers. So where the gallery context demands our concentration, it demands intimacy, it demands our time, these street installations could allow for a much more casual experience. The walking figures, faced northwards, pulling fellow walkers towards the Hugh Lane Gallery at the top of the street on Parnell Square, almost as if they were inviting them to enjoy the collection, to come into the gallery and enjoy the collection. Now, 2008 wasn't the first time O'Connell Street became a public platform for contemporary art practice. In 2006, many of you will remember, there was an exhibition of Barry Flanagan's giant hares leaping up and down the street. Again, this exhibition was curated by the Hugh Lane. Here we have a piece called Standing Hands Behind Back from 2000, and this was taken from Julian Opie's website. So his work ranges from painting and printmaking to animated films and three-dimensional sculptures. But this idea of a simple graphic image really is at the heart of everything he does. So he makes apparently simplified representations of generic subjects, portraits, male and female nudes, as we see here, animals, cars. Here's an example of one of his cars, huge, as you see, made of aluminium paint and vinyl. buildings and landscapes. That was 2004. This piece here is a landscape, just called Landscape, a screen print on paper, part of the Tate London's collection. For all the simplified representation, don't be fooled into thinking his process is simple. He may be conveying things in terms of their simplest possible visual expression, but the outline figures or the spare stylized landscape as we see here, these are all edited down from vast amounts of data. The process involves the reduction of photographs or short films into figurative reproductions. In this case, Suzanne walking in a leather skirt, Opie films his models walking on a treadmill, or so that is my understanding of the beginnings of his process, although walking on a treadmill in a leather skirt could be a little problematic. But certainly the type of movement she makes would suggest that to be true. And for all that the imagery is largely generated by means of digital technology, computer-aided drawing, and it's very much, of course, informed by our technological environment, but nevertheless, it's still absolutely a reflection of Opie's own sensibilities and his talents. I found myself, when looking at these images and going through his work, I thought of David Hockney's fascination with the iPad and that series that he produced of really distinctive and very typically Hockney drawings that came from that. Indeed, went on to have a huge exhibition in the Royal Academy in London on the back of that. So in the same way, for all the technology, that computers are involved, he maintains a distinctive style of his own. Now, this is a portrait of Gary Popstar, and it's one of a series of 6 screen prints that Opie produced in 1998 to 9. And the prints were made from hand-cut stencils based on photographs that Opie had altered on a computer. So he takes the photograph, he uploads it onto the computer, and from there develops stencils. He began making portraits derived from photographs of real individuals, pared down to a series of lines and blocks of colour, although this piece is black and white. Now, Gary Popstar is a figure that Opie has portrayed in several versions, different sizes, colours. Here is an example that was sold at Sotheby's in 1999, printed onto different materials. A different depiction of the same man, longer hair, wearing beads, different coloured top, glasses, very different from the first, but still recognisably the same man. Now, Julian Opie is and always was very commercially aware. He produced catalogues of his print works in the form of sales brochures, which illustrate and list variable formats and prices for ranges of sculptures and prints. Anything that's produced in multiple form, he offers multiple versions and combinations. This, of course, makes sense as an artist, but also would be very much influenced by pop art and the commercialization of pop art. And this, no surprises, is an important element in Opie's work. Cartoon and comic book imagery were, of course, brought into the realm of high art in the middle of the 20th century by Roy Lichtenstein. And standardized or industrialized portraiture, involving different colored versions of the same image, as above. This was, of course, pioneered by Andy Warhol in the 20th century, the 1960s particularly, and this iconic image of Marilyn Monroe's screen print from 1967 will be so familiar to everybody. At the same time, Patrick Caulfield was working at the time when Opie would have been in college. And this is a painting produced by him. It's a screen print, excuse me. So he began painting or producing prints of objects and blocks of pure color, outlined, heavily outlined in black, as we see. And this is from the Tate collection that's called Fruit and Bowl. With regard to his biography, Julian Opie was born in London in 1958. In fact, he still lives in London. He has a studio in the East End. And he studied art at Goldsmiths College, where he was taught by Professor Michael Craig Martin, the artist in his own right, but also very influential teacher, influenced so many of his students, but also a generation of artists who became the Young British Artists, and known as Young British Artists, or YBAs. Now, mostly that influence allowed for a new conceptual attitude to art making and a blending of art forms using different media. But Opie was probably very directly influenced by Craig Martin, as he'd been his studio assistant for some time. So this is an example of work by Michael Craig Martin and the sorts of work that would have influenced Julian Opie. So it's a paint roller, as we see, dated 1983 and taken from his website. And in fact, the drawing is really just hand-applied black tape, crepe tape, sticky tape, really adhesive. And he made flat outline wall drawings of everyday objects and rendered them in flat colors on canvas. So very much interested in the absolute simplification of form. Now, Aidan Dunn from the Irish Times wrote a review about the 2008 exhibition held on the pieces on O'Connell Street, and he talked about a number of things, but he said that he felt that you could also see the influence of Japanese woodblock prints, those strongly outlined, simplified forms, familiar to anybody who's familiar with the Hugh Lane collection, and the extent that those woodblock prints influenced the Impressionists and Post-Impressionist artists. But also significantly, and this is a reference that Opie makes himself very often. He talks of the influence of Hergé and his protagonist, his wonderful little figure Tintin, and how that graphic style of the Belgian artist had such an influence on his own aesthetic. This is called Tintin is Nobody, and it's a panel from a Tintin and Hergé exhibition that was held at the Belgian Comic Strip Centre in Brussels, which is a permanent museum, in fact. So Tintin's face, as we see, so familiar. It's made up of a few very simple features. It's almost expressionless, and because it's so neutral, because the features are so simply drawn, it becomes the ideal recipient for emotions, both the emotions that are felt and are projected by readers, otherwise known as viewers, and arguably it's the same with Opie's figurative work. Also, just like with comic books, there is something playful and toy-like about Opie's work that contributes greatly to its attractiveness. There's a visual language of simple signs. Here we have Suzanne and Julian walking. So the model Suzanne that he's used repeatedly over many years, and worked particularly with her between, I think, 2006 and this 2008. And here Julian, that's the artist himself walking. This is a silk screen on painted wooden board. And this is another piece, Suzanne, again, recognizable, walking in a green dress. Now, he has been criticized for being superficial, that his representations can come across as appearing superficial. And for all that his works look entirely at home in an urban world, in a sort of affluent consumer culture, technology ever present, I think we can forgive him for this. This, of course, is the world that Opie inhabits, the world he knows. And he is very computer savvy. I think you can even download an Opie screensaver, for example. He certainly depicts mundane, everyday experiences, walking, driving a car, all in a mode of virtual reality that is, you could hardly describe as profound, but it is visually appealing, it's compelling to a certain extent, and true to aspects of contemporary life, to certain aspects of contemporary life at least. Similarly, his portraits are of seemingly affluent individuals. And you might wonder why we would be or should be interested in them at all, and particularly as Opie himself is or appears to be at pains not to probe beneath the surface. He is interested in them to the extent they are indicative of their social and cultural status and perhaps their context. And he often includes their occupation, for example, as we saw with Gary Popstar. Perhaps, however, his intention is to maintain a neutrality, an everyman quality, which allows them to blend with any of us and our own experiences. His most famous portraits, or certainly the portraits that brought him to world view and world recognition, was this image, the four members of the pop group Blur. So clockwise from the top left, Damon Albarn, Dave Rowntree, Alex James, and Graham Coxon. Now this image was used for the album cover Blur, the best of, which was released in 2000. And the image appeared on billboards, posters, mugs, t-shirts, and compact discs. And while the images are unapologetically, and indeed were used commercially, they are absolutely commercial, at the same time they still manage to qualify as fine art. In his portraiture, as we discussed with Gary Popstar, the human face is characterized by these black outlines, flat areas of color, very minimized detail, to the extent that the eye becomes just that black circle of the pupil. Sometimes a head is represented by a circle with a space where the neck would be, as with Suzanne. But once we know her, we recognize her. Despite the simple reduction, the faces are still characterized. It's as if Opie wants to see just how far he can minimize the amount of information in an image while still making it recognizable and distinctive. And it seems that he can push it very far indeed. Opie's portraits, for all their graphic economy, are strangely fascinating, not least because of the tension he generates between the living subject that we know, that has a name, and the almost abstract sign that is the result. He put it brilliantly himself when he said, "I want it to be as if each person I draw were a multinational company with a logo." It's appropriate in this context that his subjects also included very well-known people, the model Kate Moss and the rock star Bryan Adams, as well as this band Blur. His style was brought to an even wider audience when it became part of the stage set for U2's Vertigo tour in 2005. And here we see the LED screen. You can see, I think, just in the foreground, you can see the members of the band, so you can see the scale of it. So this is at the LED screen at the back of the stage, was displaying this aimless walking man figure, stepping out on repeat, as we've seen Suzanne walking do. Again, a computer-generated video, and a very simplified graphic style of that typical form that we now know to be Opie's. Just to look at another few examples of walking figures. This was a piece made in 2011, so it's not a computer-generated piece. It's vinyl on wall and very large scale. I'm not sure where it is. I took it from his website, but I found it interesting because it is absolutely the same style, that same spare graphic quality in black and white, and a crowd of moving figures. This is a piece called Promenade, which is on permanent, it's a permanent piece in Calgary in Canada, made in 2012. And again, it's a continuous computer animation. So in this case, the figures are moving, but on a four-sided LED screen, much more colorful and really lights up at night. Again, those moving figures, those moving every man. Here we have the man himself, Julian Opie, at the Listen Gallery in London. So the Listen Gallery has been his gallery since the beginning. Of course, he is represented by many galleries around the world at this stage. But this is his home gallery, if you like. And this is an exhibition that took place in 2012. And it's interesting not just to see the man, but also the work and to see the scale of the work beside him. These life-size figures reduced down to the simplest forms and yet wholly individual, bustling along, busy in an urban setting. This is another piece that is a permanent installation in Zurich, and this is a much larger scale. So you can see the people below, and obviously a very busy shopping district. I think I can see tram lines in the foreground. So this is a retail outlet, and they are on a large scale. I'll show you them moving now. This handily piece was on his website, so I could easily download it. So not dissimilar from the walking figures on O'Connell Street, but on a much, much larger scale and in one particular venue. Here we have Suzanne walking again. So this is how she moves. See if I can keep it going, excuse me. Now, to conclude, we talked about the tension created between the living subject and the hugely abstracted version of them, the sign, the logo of them, if you like. And in relation to the portraits, here, these animated portraits add another layer of tension. Here we see Suzanne again walking in her leather skirt. We see a virtual logo. Suddenly, when we're there and in front of it, we see this logo blink, change its expression, just in terms of its movement, and it really does spring kind of disconcertingly to life. It's very unexpected in a still situation. So his walking figures are, strangely enough, beautiful. They are beautiful in the way that they encapsulate the elegance of simple movements. They're publicly cited, suggesting the status of the urban dweller as part of the crowd, a type, but also a distinctive individual. They manage to be both specific individuals and everybody's. They are us. Alternatively, Opie's subjects could be taken as being alienated, soulless consumers in their depicted relationships to the world. And to a certain extent, this is possibly an accurate reflection of the way things are. Perhaps we are one thing at one time and another at another. Julian Opie has exhibited widely throughout the world, including public commissions from New York to Seoul to Zurich. His work is represented in major institutions and galleries, including the Tate in London and Museum of Modern Art in New York. I would recommend that there's if you're going onto YouTube, there's a video made by the Hugh Lane Gallery at the time of the exhibition. I think it runs for 10, 15 minutes maximum, showing the exhibition and showing the figures walking on O'Connell Street. It's called Walking on O'Connell Street, and as I say, it's made by the Hugh Lane Gallery. And just to conclude, there are further details of the upcoming programs on the Hugh Lane's website, and particularly hughLane.ie/education. So there's many things coming in the future, despite the gallery temporarily being closed. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope you found it very interesting, and I look forward to doing something else soon again. Thank you.